about the cloud debugging tool. So I think, first of all, same as before, do interrupt me with questions, if any. But first, maybe some background. How many here works with Azure? Almost everybody. Okay, so that's good. So let's see if I can get it to work. Okay, so I decided this summer that I wanted to get the kind of certification AZ204. So I passed that one in August. How many here has been certified or have any certification? How many here wants to take one? That's a few, So actually, I studied for this one the entire summer, It was my summer project. And, the question is, how should I learn all of these things? Because it's quite a lot that I try to cram into this kind of certification. And, oh my God, what I'm going to do. So the option could be one classic option if you kind of go online. And if you actually do want to do this, I can highly recommend. I thought I did have some links about that. Let me see if I can. No, there's actually a good. Let's open a browser and there's actually a good Azure certification Reddit group. So if you want to get some insights on approaches and how to pass the certification, I think there's a good kind of community here. So that I can highly recommend. But anyway, so the classic approach is to you find some Udemy training videos, you do the MS Learn material online, you do the kind of practice test, both a Microsoft and maybe some third-party practice test, and hopefully you can get the certification, and maybe you make some notes, you can get some notes as a kind of result. But at the same time, you spend all this time studying, maybe months, and then you get this kind of paper and you have some random notes. But how many people go back to those notes and read them afterwards? I mean, don't do that. It's more like, it's a waste product. So the question is, how did I do it? So I tried to do it the hard way instead. So first of all, I believe that you don't understand something until you can explain to someone else. That's my kind of core mantra. So what did I do? Well, I started by, some Udemy video, get the basics. But at the same time, I created course training material, PowerPoints, exercises for like imaginary future training class. So I was thinking about ahead, I want to do a training class because I want to be able to explain the things I learned. So when I look at, Cosmos DB partition keys, or if I look at, event hubs, details, I want them to be in a shape of PowerPoints and trying to break it down so I can actually try to explain to a future myself, So I could actually go back and see my presentation. I should be able to learn and understand, each concept. So I did that, MS Learn, do a practice test, build materials along the way. And this material, the raw materials, I can show you some, Cosmos DB, talking about, the partition keys, So this is I did this summer while kind of studying, trying to break it down, the resource hierarchy in Cosmos DB. And I talk about partitions and blah, blah, blah. You go down to logical partitions and you have physical partitions. And, you talk about the limitations and, you have the restrictions and all of that. And then you talk about partition key, you actually want it to be, and you see, it's unfinished stuff, of course, because it's only the raw material. And at the same time, talking about why the partition key is crucial, because you want equal amount of data in each partition. That's the kind of core idea to get an optimal kind of Cosmos DB database. So what I did, and as another example of, messaging. So, service bus, reading from queues, talk about the receive modes and talking about the difference around different things, and pick and lock mode, and among many things I have actually forgotten what it is. But I do have the kind of in presentation form, so it's quickly for me to kind of get up to speed. So that's good. So I did that while I'm studying, and then you might find, what's the point of that? Well, but I also did a project, because you could do MS Learn exercises, or you can make your own kind of hello world exercises, like a console application, or deploy some container. That's all good. But many of the concepts in Azure, you actually need some infrastructure. You need maybe a send event, event grid events to a webhook, and then you need to build a webhook destination, or you want to simulate, blob storage, soft delete and versioning. How do I simulate that in a nice way, so I can understand how those concepts work? So the outcome of this was that I got the certification. Yay! I got the kind of raw training material, so that was good. And I also got an open source project, that's even more awesome. So all of this, builds up, my CV, certification, training, and open source project. And also now I'm working on a kind of a real 5-day kind of Azure for Developer training class. So that's, coming next year. But so the question is, what project did I write? So what I did was, I like the kind of the kind of story about how we explore the planet Mars. So the Mars, how we explore that one, we send up a Mars rover, or multiple ones, and what they do is they peek around, they look around, measure, experiments, in this kind of unfamiliar, hostile territory. Okay, but when we explore Azure, it's an equally kind of scary place. I mean, it's so big. I mean, there's so many things, and as a beginner trying to kind of deep dive into Azure, you really kind of get lost pretty quickly, because so many things going on at the same time. Deployment and scripts and command lines, and there's tokens and security and logging and everything. So you want some guidance. So what I did was my own kind of rover for the Azure cloud, called the Cloud Debugger. So the question is, what can you do? Well, I mean, it's a continued, it's an evolving project, and it can actually help you, talking to most of the common services that is part of the certification, but also other things. So I can look at the kind of logging, I can have an REST API endpoint, I can look at the environment variables, I can talk to blob storage, I can talk to, Cosmos, and I can, send a message to a queue and receive from a queue and explore how, it behaves in different kind of, scenarios. And so I made this tool as an ASP.NET Core application, and it can be deployed to all of those 5 places in one go. So I have scripts that can deploy it to all those 5 places in one go, meaning that I can have the same application in 5 different places. So I can actually compare, what's the difference like if I went in a app service compared to container apps, compared to container instances. So the same app in all places, I can then, by doing so, compare, the behavior, the environment variables, and the security aspects, and other things. So this is kind of deployed in this way that I do have some PowerShell scripts that deploys it to app services, and then through the container registry to the container hosting for both Linux app service, container instances, and container apps. So that's awesome. And at the same time, it allowed me to more in-depth explore the kind of secure development practices using the GitHub tooling, like Dependable. We have code scanning for code secrets. We have the secret scanning things and code scanning, so we can scan for like defects and security problems and similar. But also I brought in the Sonar Cloud. How many has been using Sonar Cloud? It's quite a few. And also Sonar Lint, that is a plugin to Visual Studio, allow me to get feedback from Sonar Cloud down to Visual Studio for even further kind of warnings and suggestions and code smells and similar. So I can get an even better quality of my code base. So that's good. And then, of course, the tooling, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's many tools. There's like 35 different tools to choose from. But what does it look like? So I can, let me see. Let's go to, okay, so I do have it up and deployed. So I can actually, no wait, links. That's going to open all of them. So right now I do have it all deployed to all 5 places, and we say the app looks exactly the same in all 5 places. So that's good. I can very simply look at my environment variables, what variables has been set to my app service, and we're not going to go through all of them. I can see that if there's any connection strings, I can see those. I can see the app configuration if there's anything coming in. So if we're running the ASP.NET Core configuration system, what does actually ASP.NET Core's configuration system see? I can, for example, see details about the current request, because if I go to example, in this case, the Azure App Service, it will actually add its own headers. So sometimes, you won't actually know what is going on under the hood. So you can actually see the additional request headers that Azure adds to the incoming request. And that can be an issue in some cases. We also have a nice tool to talk about identity. So you like to assign an identity to your application, and typically you use the default Azure Credentials tool, right? You all know about the default Azure Credentials. What does it do? Anyone?
So it assumes the role that you've been assigned to, if you are using RBAC, for example, or if you have set some environment variables,
Yeah.
the environment in which you are running your workflows, like it's
Yeah.
automatically fetches that identity and then uses that to run your workflow or your script.
Yeah. So that's, so I have some picture of that one. Let's find it. Yeah. So what that default Azure Credentials do is actually it contains a big list of different token credentials, and it will actually scan them from the top to bottom, finding the one that can actually get me an access token back, so that I then can access like storage, your storage account or similar. So it's kind of all in one, But the drawback with that one, if it does not find any credentials, then it takes some time. It takes like 6-10 seconds to complete, to do the scanning, if it does not find a credential that match. So, but the problem with this default Azure Credentials, it's very locked down. You can't see that much about what is going on inside, right? It's a kind of all or nothing. So what did I do? Well, I downloaded the source code to that library to my application and hooked in my own logging statements. So basically, I can see actually what it does internally. So in this case, I run it as a managed identity. I can see that my access token, okay, that sounds pretty basic, but I can actually see, first of all, which one did it select? Did it select the one that I actually did expect to be selected, or something else? Because if you get the wrong credentials, well, it can be hard to troubleshoot, if it uses the wrong identity to access your storage account, for example. So it looks at the different ones. So it always first scans the environment. It did not find any environment variables that matched, so it failed. It then looks at the workload identity. That's mean the Kubernetes. It does not use that, so it fails. And then it comes down to managed identity. So I can see all the details of it. And then it successfully got me an access token, So it did not need to scan the Visual Studio credential or Azure CLI or the PowerShell or developer CLI credentials because you've already found one. But that's the list it scans, and this tool will display all the kind of inner workings of that tool. And then there's a kind of reward log as well. And if you really want to go deep down, you can even look at the internal log when it makes the internal HTTP calls to the Android ID to get the tokens back, and you can really get low level here into the kind of request. And if you want to kind of debug it even further, so that's pretty neat. What else? So one thing that is pretty kind of, if I go to the portal, I will look at, for example, app services. I go to my Linux app service. Let's try scale out. Okay, so I will scale out my app service. Let's do like 6 different units. Okay, that's awesome. So let me just go back here. So one problem is that, okay, you do a scale out, but does it really work? How do you verify, or how can you visually verify that the scale out actually works? Because, it can be, you can hit reload in your browser, did it change the endpoint or whatever, that can be hard. But in this case, I created some tooling for that, of course, because I wanted to see scale out in action. So in this case, I can call this page. So this one will load my application from 4 different iframes, constantly reloading them, so I can verify that, scale out actually works. But at the same time, we see that, this one is the same instance all the time. We see that it's been up and running for like 500 minutes. So does it really work? But then, of course, you remember that, hey, scale out is good, but you also have cookie and session affinity, meaning that Azure load balancer sets a cookie in your browser to tie you to a specific instance. So, and that's the kind of default behavior. So even though I scale out to like 6 different instances, from my browser's point of view, I only see one instance all the time. So that's pretty kind of boring, of course. So I did one that actually clears this cookie all the time. So hopefully when, did I save this one? Yeah, I did save it. So this one should, I need to actually choose the Linux, not that one. So I go to the right deployment. Of course, I do have 5 different deployments. So that's why in this case, we here now see different colors, because I really want to visually see that, it actually do scale out. I can actually see here the different instances, and and we see that it's been up and running for like 1 minute, so it's the fresh one I'm looking at. So that's pretty nice, I think. And if I were to go back with keeping the cookies, we will only see one instance all the time. And in this case, you see that it's been up for like 500 milliseconds. That's the oldest kind of instance. And if I were to try to clear the cookies, it would eventually set a new cookie. So if I clear the cookie once, I can see that, I'm assigned to a random instance, and but I've still kept to the same instance. And if I clear the cookie all the time, I will get this kind of random effect. It's pretty neat, I think. So that's one kind of tooling of many. But it can also be that you want to kind of to debug things. So, for example, I have an example here that you are using the kind of API management gateway. I want to set it up. I do have a very simple time API in my debugging tool. Okay, that's good. So if I go to that endpoint, so I should go to this one. I go to API time. We get the time back like that. That is awesome. And at the same time, I actually have created an API management service deployment. So if I go to this one, I've set it up, I've started to configure it, but I don't get it to work really that well. So when I go to /time up here, I get nothing. So, you might wonder, you have set up this kind of deployment, but, this one works. But when I access the time endpoint here, I just get a blank thing back. So, of course, there's so many possible problems here. Is it that, my gateway is kind of blocking the request? So is it blocked like that? Or does it go here, but maybe to the wrong endpoint? It's really, really hard to know where do I end up on, for example. So to help out with that, my tool actually do have, so if I go back to my tool, I can actually see a request log. So I can actually see all the requests being made to this kind of endpoint. So I need to go to the Linux instance, request log, and I can see that, okay, there's nothing here. It's container still. I need to go to this one. Yes. Request log, and I go down at the bottom. We see API time was called. So we see that, hey, I'm actually mapping to the wrong endpoint. So my request through the API gateway gets through, but made to the wrong destination URL. And that can be pretty hard to diagnose. So in this case, this tool actually shows you the full request header and body, and also the response that gets back when I call this kind of API. So that's nice. But anyway, so let me clear this log and do it one more time. So this is the Linux Cloud Debugger, and if I were to go to my endpoint /time, I will load this page a few times, and I go back to this log here. I actually thought I should see some request being made here. Okay, so let's explore why not. So let's go back to my have an API here, API definition, Cloud Debugger. I do have some settings here. So let's look at the settings here. So we see that it actually do, from the Cloud Debugger Azure websites. So if I were to go to this endpoint and do /time, wait, I see like that. We see that, the resource not found, and I should go up to /time, and we see that it's empty, it's blank output. But if I were to go back to my kind of destination kind of service and look in the request log, we should see request be made to /time. So we see that, hey, I'm missing some redirect mapping here. So as we see on this picture here, we do have /time here. We're actually seeing /time here instead, not API /time. So I need to do a redirect in my gateway. So let's quickly add that to my design. We have a thing here. So I need to here add rewrite URI template equal /time. We do redirect there instead, like that. I add that rule to remap the link, and I save this. And now, hopefully, if I go to my API gateway /time, it should return the time. So I guess it takes some yeah, we see the time now through my gateway. It works now. So it's like, you want to troubleshoot things, you want to explore things, you want to troubleshoot things. So here's tools for, if you want to explore the blob storage. So you can talk about, accessing blobs. You can talk about creating user delegation SAS token. You can create a blob access tiers to play with those. So if I were to, for example, Let's see, I need a storage account name, and I need a container name, and I need, so I could actually create 5 sample blobs, and it failed, so I need the access key. Let's try the other one. Create 5 sample blobs. Let's see if it works. Nope, did not work. I can list the blobs here at least, but then I can change the tiers. I don't know if I have the kind of access set up right now, but I can actually try to move it to from the hot. We have a tier hot, for example, and then you can move a blob down to the cool tier, and you can move a blob near to the cold tier, and you can also move a blob down to the archive tier. I mean, when you want to learn those things, the kind of blob, access tiers, you actually want to move blobs up and down, and you want to see them, so if I want to move this, blob from archive up to back to the hot tier, for example, then that actually takes like 15 minutes, 15 hours to do. So now this blob is kind of being queued up to be rehydrated back to the normal access tiers from the kind of basement archive. But that process takes like 15 minutes to 15 hours, up to 15 hours to complete. So I can see the status of that blob now, rehydrate pending to hot, priority is standard, this is a slower approach. It's all about those kind of details. So this project is all kind of open source. It's on my GitHub page, and there's a wiki talking about the documentation for each tool. There is a documentation and sample, examples around how to use it. And I think it's a nice project, and if you want to contribute with some patches or additional tools, you're free to help out. And questions? Yes.
That cloud debugging is really nice. It seems like it's set multiple parts, like it's an application itself.
Yes.
So you can't get that functionality into an existing business application. I especially think that it would be nice to have those things that could list the credential stuff in an existing application.
Yes.
Maybe implement it as middleware.
Yeah. I mean, it's actually just a class library that I have in my source code. So that one is actually part of the GitHub project, my kind of special hacked version of the default Azure credentials. So if I were to go to the source code, there's actually my Azure identity. So in here, there's actually my take on it. So what I have done is I have copied down the source code of my Azure identity. And what I have done is to, I need to go into the credentials folder. And so I renamed it to my, so I use my kind of as my kind of prefix here. So even namespacing, everything's my to separate from the real thing. And this one is called, if I get my default Azure credentials. So that's my specially hacked version that can.
Add in the middleware.
Yes, so it's not a middleware. The default Azure credentials is all class libraries. So there's no middleware part in that specific part. But it's a way for me to get insights into those different credentials. So when I, for example, use the, so when I, for example, look at the, environment variables credentials, I have my kind of hacked, I do my logging here, I extract those things to unlog that, those crucial things that you want to know. Did it actually get those credentials, and what did it actually get? And of course, when you run this tool, it is important that you follow the, because it's really dangerous, because it really show your access tokens, your inner workings, your secrets, and everything. So it's actually a bit dangerous too. But it's a nice, I think it's a nice tool for you to learn, about the Azure, how to interact with a queue. You want to send a message to a queue, you want to read it back, you want to see, how does it behave. So I think that's a nice way to learn, and that is how I learned it at least. More questions? Does it make it look like a good idea or totally sucks? I don't know. No last questions? Yes?
Did you get time to actually teach some people before you went to that certification exam?
No, I didn't teach it. I've been teaching for like 14 years, so I have experience of how to build it and how I would structure it. So that I really know. So I'm pretty confident about.
Then they would make questions.
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course.
From your mind and not from your slides.
Yes, that's a good point. Any more question?
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you were running some workload from, let's say, another cloud provider. How would this cloud debugger come in? So, for example, I'm running some workload in AWS where
Yes.
I have set up workload identity federation.
Yeah. So I mean,
Credential has been
yeah.
used in my
Yeah.
Asia credentials. How would that work?
So I mean, of course, many of the tools like a blob storage or Cosmos DB or identity, that's Azure specific. But if you want to look at your environment variables, you want to see the scale out, or you want to play with logging, for example, you can, for example, in this case, write to your logging output, or just standard output error streams. Or you want to look at, what do I see, for example, on the file system. So I have a tool to look at the local file system. So I can actually navigate the file system, change the path to look at what do I actually see in this instance on the disk. I can read any file down here. So if I go into the, I don't know, temp or whatever, if I see some file that I can access, I can actually try to kind of open that file and read it, or I can create a new, CNAG text here. Can I create it? Yes, I can create that file here. So I can actually look at files for debugging purposes on the local drive where this, service is running. So I think the foundation is the same. It can be applied to both AWS and Google Cloud or whatever. But of course, then with the cloud-specific parts, that is, all cloud-specific. So, and yes,
What kind of license is this?
it's open source, so there's no license,
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I want to kind of share with this kind of tool
but
too.
Then we could fork it and
Yeah.
do a middleware implementation of the default identity.
But once again, default identity is not a middleware; it's only a class library thing. And also, if you want to know more about that tool, that specific, how I did it, I actually do have a blog post about it. Default Azure credential under the hood, that talks about how it works and what its goal is, and that is to authenticate to Android ID and get an access token back. That is its goal. And then inside it has all of those credentials that it do scan from top to bottom, trying to find a valid access token. And if you don't want to use that one, there's an alternative called the chained token credentials handler. So the chain token credentials handler allows you to just choose specific. I just want to use these 3 credentials and not the rest to optimize your load time and discovery time to get there, because default Azure credentials can take up to 5, 6, 10 seconds to complete if it does not succeed. So it can be good to know. And also one other kind of tool, if you want to talk about the identity of things, there's also that, maybe you want to look at the caching of tokens. There's a tool for that, comparing, different benchmarking of if you, reuse the same instance of default Azure credentials, or if you're in a loop, call it each time, does it cache it or not, and that behavior is different from different kind of providers. So there's many things. And finally, before the end, I know you want to kind of continue here. So I'm actually giving away 5 presentations. So if you want me to come to your company and do a 1-hour presentation on site in Copenhagen or Helsingør area, then I'm doing that. Send me an email before the 15th, I'm happy to do that because I really like to spread the knowledge about the things I do, and I can talk about everything about security to .NET to the things I do about Azure and similar. So if you want to see more of me, you're welcome to reach out. Henrik.